In the name of Deputy Peadar Tóibín, Deputy Tóibín wishes to discuss the impact of the population cap on County Meath. It's not a one-child policy or anything that's proposed.
Well,
I assume for County Meath.
It's nearly as bad, but not just as bad. It is a serious issue, Minister, and over the last number of years I've worn a well-worn path into this chamber discussing the issues of investment in County Meath. And many people are actually unaware of this issue, but with regards to investment and resources, Meath is an outlier, Minister. Meath is actually unique with regards to the fact that amongst 28 local authorities in this state, in most categories, Meath is at the very bottom of the investment lists per capita. And I'll give you an example of it. Meath County Council is the lowest funded county council in the state. Meath County Council has the lowest number of staff per capita in the state. It has the lowest amount of expenditure per capita in the state. Meath actually gets about 61% of the national average investment per council. It gets 45% of the national average investment in housing. It gets 43% of the national average with regards to amenities, etc. Meath has about 60% of the investment with regards to water development. Meath and Louth are at the bottom with regards to mental health services in the country, and Meath has the lowest number of Gardaí per capita in the state. Navan, Meath, this morning, most people in Meath got up and left the county to go to work than actually worked in the county. That happens nowhere else in the state, and yet Navan is the biggest town in the country without a rail line. So you want us to be commuters, but you won't give us the technology or the infrastructure to do that. Now that has a radical effect on the everyday living standards of people in Meath at the moment. Now, we have started to live with the realisation in Meath that we don't get the clippings of tin off the cabinet table with regards to investment. But now it actually turns out that we have a government and a system that is actively working against us with regards to investment. Now, the National Planning Framework Working Draft Regional, Spatial and Economic Strategy for the Eastern and Midland region seeks to cap the population of Meath. It states quite clearly that there should be only 8,600 houses built for the whole of Meath between now and 2026. Now, to put this in context, there are 5,600 existing planning permissions for units that are not actually built as of yet. So, if your plan goes ahead, only 2,600 new planning applications could be issued in that period of time. So, we have a cap of 8,600 houses. Now, we have, on the other side of the equation, we have nearly 4,000 people on the housing waiting list. And there will be many people more, unfortunately, joining this housing waiting list over the next 10 years. It is actually possible that on social housing alone, the capacity being offered by the plan could actually be exhausted as such. Now, houses in Meath at the moment are as rare as hen's teeth. And the outcome of this, the outcome of putting a cap on it, will simply leave thousands of Meath families on that housing waiting list forever. And anybody that's studied any bit of economics at junior cert or leaving cert level will know that if you put a cap on supply, while there is increasing demand in the county, it can only have one response. And that response will be the acceleration of rents and house prices in County Meath over that period of time. Now, to tell people who are currently to the pin of the collar paying maybe 60% of their disposable income that we're going to now accelerate the house prices in Meath, I think it's absolutely shocking. So, Minister, what I would like for the government to do, to say that absolutely no cap or targets will be put into place with regards to population growth in Meath. Now, I am for spatial development. I have argued strongly in this chamber for proper spatial development, but one that is powered and energised by infrastructural development elsewhere, not by reducing the opportunity for counties such as my own.
Thank you, Minister. I want to thank Deputy Tóibín for raising the matter, which I'm taking on behalf of Minister Murphy, and for providing me with the opportunity to discuss the population growth projections for Meath as set out under the NPF. The suggestion being put forward that there is a cap on housing delivery in County Meath is erroneous and misleading, but it is also disappointing given that instead of a focus on more and more commuter-driven development, future planning for the county needs to take account of past mistakes. We are all familiar with recent and historic trends when the county saw very high levels of housing development without the matching growth in local employment opportunities and provision of essential amenities and community services for fast-growing communities. It seems as if those putting about the notion of a cap are actually trying to use the current housing issues to create an opportunity to go back to the old and failed models of zone and build, that while rewarding landowners and developers with high financial returns from speculative housing development, don't tackle the issues facing existing communities in Meath from previous suburban expansion, such as congested roads, pressure on schools, limited amenities and a general sense of housing being provided ahead of jobs and services, not the other way around. The strategic planning policies outlined in Project Ireland 2040 are aimed at a different path to what we saw in the Celtic Tiger era. That's clearly what people wanted, as evidenced during the public consultation. Self-sustaining jobs and service-centred planning and development, not just housing growth for the sake of housing growth. Nevertheless, it's vitally important that we do plan for the future growth. So a very detailed examination of estimates of housing, employment and population changes in overall national and regional context was undertaken by the ESRI for my department. In addition, development of a draft regional spatial and economic strategy for Dublin, Midlands and East region is based on these projected national population growth targets communicated by the Department to all local and regional authorities in early July. The facts are that the current guide for planning for future population growth in Meath out to 2026 is for an additional 26,000 people above the 2016 levels, equivalent to adding the entire populations of Ashbourne, Kells and Trim combined to the county in a 10-year period. How this very high level of growth is to be planned for on the ground is rightly a matter for Meath County Council to determine as part of its county development plan, which must be reviewed after the regional spatial and economic strategy has been finalised. The county development plan review process must also ensure that there is capacity for up to a further 25% of the projected population target to 2026, or an additional 6,500 people, as development doesn't simply stop in 2026. This means that the next Meath County Development Plan will need to set out how the county can accommodate an additional 32,500 people to 2026. In this context, far from any cap on growth, there is plenty of scope to ensure the continued growth and development of Meath, but on a sustainable basis that is about balanced life-work balanced approach, and not just the commuter-based development that was so prevalent in County Meath and indeed other parts of the country in the past.
Topical.
Minister, I hear you with regards to jobs, absolutely. Like Meath is the commuter county with regards to East Coast. Our comparator counties are Louth, Kildare and Wicklow. All of them get far more jobs in the IDA per capita than Meath does. So, no, absolutely, I would pair population with jobs if I was in the government's position. But let's say, just look at the population, for example. The population increase in Navan between the year 2000 and 2016 was 5,322 persons, which is roughly about 532 people per year, and this was with a large chunk of stagnant growth period in the middle of it. The draft plan, which the national framework document seems to be looking at, would only allow for about 376 people to live in Navan roughly every year. To do that, you're talking about actually dezoning about 205 hectares of land that's actually dezoned for housing development in that area. Now, this would be detrimental to every club, every school, every business in the area. Any enterprise of any size at all would never consider Meath again, because they'd realise, well, we can't get new workers to actually live in Meath because of this particular target or cap. Investment that has been withheld from Meath for generations, for example, the rail line. Now, we have promised by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael for Yonks that the rail line would be built, and yet it has never come. The chance of getting the rail line in the future would be radically reduced if this target or cap were in place. And I note you're saying that these are targets, but targets in a plan such as a national framework document are not fuzzy figures just to be thrown around and kind of discussed. People are employed to pursue targets. People's jobs are to implement targets. And if you talk to any of the officials in the authorities in this area, they will pursue these targets because it's their job to pursue these targets. And indeed, it will be a failure in their eyes if they don't achieve these targets. Why have a national development plan with targets on it and then say, well, the targets, they're not really that important to the whole process? So then the National Development Plan is a ball of smoke in the first place. Either the targets are real and the National Development Plan is real, or they're not.
Just to refer to some of the comments you made, the targets are real, but they're not caps. I suppose that's the point. And I think there's not as much difference between what the government is proposing and what you're seeking, actually, Deputy Tóibín, in the sense that when you think of some of the towns and villages in County Meath and the huge, from the 1990s, the population of County Meath doubled. And a lot of that was in the towns and villages of the county, particularly in the eastern part of the county, but right through it. And it was that kind of zone and build policy, which was national policy at the time. Government want to ensure that the development of Meath and other places into the future is underpinned by sustainability. And what I mean by that, keeping people living close to their work, close to their education, close to their other amenities that they wish to avail of. And that's why the central plank of the MPF is about rebalancing development into the next 10 years and the next 30 years indeed. That, you know, the huge population increases that we've seen in that Dublin and Dublin-centred area in the last 30 years, that's unsustainable for the future. And part of that is the national planning framework itself, but also part of it, I want to emphasise that the figures that are mentioned, none of this is in stone. Like, there is an ongoing process now between all local authorities and the regional authorities, and indeed with the department, as to how the NPF will actually play out in terms of development in every region across the country. But the central thing is to ensure that more than half of the development of the country in the next 30 years is outside of Dublin. And there's no question, and I don't want anyone to think that there is, of dezoning tracts of land in Navan. That's not on anyone's agenda. And I also want to emphasise, before I finish, that my colleague Deputy English was hoping to make it, or Minister English, but he had a commitment on a housing meeting earlier, and I think he might actually even be in I was on the phone to him, but he just wasn't able to respond directly.
Thank you, Mr.